Hello and welcome to my home. I'm going to very briefly talk about the text I wrote, How Not to Be Governed by Our Digital Technologies. My name is Mercedes Bunz oder Mercedes Bunz or Mercedes, from wherever language you come from, I don't mind. But yeah, I'm going to answer 3 questions. First question is, what is the reason you wrote this essay? Well, I realized quite a while ago, about 10 years, that there's a severe issue with our digital technologies. A lot of us criticize them. A lot of us don't feel very comfortable that they have all our data. We don't really like them, but we continue using them. And this paradox really fascinated me, especially when in those moments, like some of you might remember the Edward Snowden leak. I think it was about 2013. When we were told that indeed the US government is looking at all our data and investigating millions of people, and that they are tapping the platforms we use, Google, Facebook, Skype, and so on. Now, there was outrage in my inbox. So a lot of my friends are very, very critical. They're critical hackers, and they really didn't like being surveyed by the US government. But there was only one single person, which funnily enough was my uncle, Axel. So my uncle was the only person emailing me that he switched his account to an account that is free from being tapped because, everyone else stayed with their Gmail, including me. So I'm part of this problem that I'm describing here. So that quite fascinated me. Another example, very briefly, is that the citizens of Germany have the tendency to be really critical of Google. It is one of the few countries where Google Street View has been stopped because there was an outcry of the streets being filmed by the Google car. But while we are really very good as Germans to criticize Google verbally, most of us are still using Google as a search engine. And there are other search engines which are not Google. DuckDuckGo is a very good example. But if you compare the market penetration in Germany, which Google has by 95%, that is quite high compared with the US user market share of and penetration of in the 80s. So that paradox really fascinated me. Why do we criticize our digital technologies, but why don't we change anything? So I decided to devote some time and to inquire it philosophically. And with this, we are with question 2. So here's question 2. What problem does the essay address? The problem in my essay addresses the shift from a political to a technical subject. Now, we are all technical subjects. You at the moment are watching something digital. And my question is, in what way does this change power when we all live in platforms and with digital technology and not just in nations anymore, in cities? So traditionally, when we think of what we are as political subjects, we could say that there is a direct link between power and resistance. Michel Foucault has showed that, and I discussed that in the essay. Resistance might not be able to overthrow power, but it can shape it and it can irritate it. But this doesn't work anymore with digital technologies. In the digital world, the link between power and resistance is broken. Because the technical subject is differently as a concept. When we leave traces in the digital world, those traces are then being taken up by big corporations to calculate and predict us as users. Unfortunately, the link between my trace and me here in the real world is weak. So when I leave something on my screen, let me get a screen up like this, for example, that is not directly linked to me, even I left it. It is my sort of little cookie or my serving behavior, my shopping behavior, but that is very, very much not linked from the perspective of the technology company to me, because they only need this little thing that I clicked yes here and no there, and then they have a little bit of me, but that doesn't represent my identity, of course. So the link between me and reality and my trace is weak. The technology company takes my trace, uses and collects them and analyzes them and calculates them as big data. My trace is getting lost in a huge calculations of many traces, and it does not really matter. If they have one subject more or less, who cares? So this is why the link between power and resistance is broken. At the same time, the technology company is not really interested in me as a subject. It is enough to have this trace. One European philosopher, Antoinette Rouvroy, who's from France, put it as this: knowledge is today not produced anymore about the world, but from the digital world. And here in the real world, I have no say about my trace, and even if I had, it wouldn't be important. It's just a little bit in a sea of big data. So the old political way of saying, no, I don't want to be governed by that, does not work anymore in digital technology. So how can we shape the digital technologies we are using? Because they're everywhere and we are with them all the time. So that's question 3. Here's question 3. How can we begin to address these issues in public policy? So my text thinks through this philosophically, but no worries. I will sum up here how we can develop another critical practice and how we can turn this into public policy. My inspiration comes from a US author, the scholar, computational scientist actually, Phil Agar, and the French philosopher Gilles Deleuze. So given the fact that platforms have become the countries we live in now, often we are on them daily, I think we need to start understanding us as their citizens and not as their users. Technology has become too important, so it shouldn't just be a service and we shouldn't just be users. It is shaping our lives. So how can we rethink our relationship with technology? I think in the end it means that there needs to be more constructive and collaborative engagement with that technology to ensure we are not governed like that. So this is it's quite hard to achieve. How can we just, we're using Google, we're using Facebook. How can we be constructive and collaborative? So with international operating technology companies, it is quite difficult. But we can start, for example, with the digital management of our cities and regions and even with national government. And we can also, of course, put laws in place that sort of curb international technology companies. So that would be one policy, of course. The other one is the question, how can we shape technology we can actually shape, like the technology in our city or in our country? Can we work together with technology on collecting data that is of public value, such as data that helps us to fight water waste or save electricity, or to develop an interface that allows me to apply for financial assistance because I'm a single mom or I lost my job and now I want a form that doesn't confuse me and that's not turning me further down, but that's helping me. So instead of saying, no, we don't want to be governed like that, we need to start saying, how can we find a way towards technology and allow a collaboration of citizens, programmers, and politicians? So not saying, no, I don't want to be governed like that and turn away, but say, no, I don't want to be governed like that, but interfere. And I think that's a really important shift we haven't done yet. Some have done this work, and these are examples we can follow. Barcelona as a city and municipality is a really, really good example where programmers and citizens and politicians sat together and developed a range of services for the collective. So for policy, this would mean to look for ways to include citizens into technical decisions. For us, the citizens, this means to leave our comfortable place as a user and to participate in the production of technology. Not everyone will have time for that, but there can always be a delegation of citizens that rotate. So you, with your constitution, have a very good, the Chilean constitution is a really good example that there can be a few people helping and not everyone needs to engage. So this is just one idea, but my text praises the collective, and I will also hopefully not be the only one delivering a solution here. We all should think about this together. How could our digital technologies become more participatory? So I'll leave you here. I hope Paula's making notes so that I can learn from your discussion now. And I'd like to thank my colleagues Birgit Kaiser and Katrin Thiele, who I owe a lot for writing this text, and in Chile in particular Paula Espinosa, and the Goethe-Institut and the publisher Laurel for their support and publishing this text. And here is the book in Spanish with Laurel. And yes, oh yes, buy the book. Have a good discussion. Bye.